So does Samsung finally have the winning formula to be able to beat out all the iPhones from this point forward? Have they finally figured it out? Have they come together with another mammoth company to take out Apple forever? No, not really. No. I mean, it'll be interesting, I guess, but it's not really that big of a deal. Some of you might think it is. It really isn't, though. I mean, it's kind of cool, but I'll tell you why it doesn't really matter right after this.
This is, you listening to Travis.
What up, players? Welcome back. And for all you new people, welcome. My name's Travis and I do tech videos every single week and have a blast doing them. If that sounds like fun to you, sit back, relax, and enjoy the video. Anything I talk about will be in the description below. But for now, let's just get into the video. So you may have heard about a story back in 2019 that Samsung has kind of come into contact and made a deal with AMD. Now, AMD has been around for a long time making processors for desktop and laptop computers. And when they first came out, they were kind of the cheap alternative. But man, the last couple of years, they've been turning it up. Matter of fact, I have a Ryzen in my desktop and I'm really happy with the performance I get out of that thing. And it's so much cheaper than a lot of the kind of comparably spec'd Intel processors. And this past year, AMD has really been kicking it up to another level. If you're really into AMD processors, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Having said that, it looks like they might be getting into bed with Samsung to get into mobile processing. If you've been paying attention to gaming, then you know AMD has processors in both the PlayStation 4, Xbox One, and will be in the upcoming new Xbox and PlayStation consoles. The focus there is obviously gaming, and gaming uses what's called GPUs, or graphical processing units. Now, one thing you may not know, especially if you live in the United States, is that the Samsung line of S phones have been using two different processors with both a CPU and GPU completely differently depending on where in the world you buy them. If you live in the States and certain other places, you've been lucky enough to get the Snapdragon. Now, you've heard of the Snapdragon processors before, but if you don't live in the States, you probably have gotten the Exynos. Now, the Exynos processor and its accompanying GPU are made by Samsung. And that might sound great because you might think, well, you know, Apple has their A series of processors and that works pretty well with their operating system, but it's not been good. Every year, the gap between Snapdragon and the Exynos processors has gotten bigger and bigger, not just from performance, but battery life. All you gotta do is look in the comment section of any video that reviews a phone that has any of the Exynos processors versus a Snapdragon. You will see the people in the comments, especially overseas, wishing they could get a hold of a Snapdragon processor phone in their country. And of course, they can import them, but it's just not the normal thing you get when you just order the phone online. And Samsung knows this. Their processors have been falling further and further behind every year. And this year, with the S20 series of phones, is really bad. Like upwards of an hour's less battery life, and just the processor just isn't anywhere near the 865. But they knew this last year, which is why they jumped into bed with AMD. And AMD's kicking all types of butt. Let me tell you something, they've been really coming into their own the last couple of years in desktop and mobile processing and gaming processing. And I think it's Samsung's thought that maybe if they get in line with AMD that, hey, they can bring their processors up to another level. Of course, I think they would rather have their own processors in their phones rather than Snapdragon and paying that whole price. And it may have just worked. There are some leaked benchmarks that show that this new processor that could be coming out in next year's phones pretty much kicks the crap out of the current 865 and potentially even the 875 because it's that much of a lead. And because of that, could potentially actually beat any A series processor from Apple. Now, before I get into the reason why that actually doesn't matter, let me talk a little bit more about that last part. This new processor and CPU is going to be better potentially than Snapdragon, but will that matter? Up until this point, Samsung has been using the Snapdragon processor for North America, and I think one or other two places, and then Exynos for everywhere else. And that's one of the reasons why the S20 series became kind of expensive. They had to go with the Snapdragon with 5G and all the things that it has. Otherwise, they would just use their own processor. This doesn't necessarily mean that all future phones will have this processor and CPU combination. I mean, it makes sense that it would, but I'm not really so sure. First of all, we have no idea if there is a contract between Samsung and Qualcomm, who makes a Snapdragon processor. If there is, they might be locked in for a couple more years. Or there might even be other reasons why they wouldn't go with their own processor and GPU in American phones. Like, why haven't they done it now? Why haven't they transitioned over now? They've had many years to do it. They could have transitioned by now. So the question remains, will this new processor and GPU transition over for everyone in 2021 and later? Maybe, and if it does, it will perhaps be the most powerful smartphone on the planet. It doesn't matter. Doesn't even matter. It may matter to some people in the comment section of tech videos, but let me tell you, by and large, it makes no difference to selling of phones across the world. In case you didn't know, the #1 selling Android phone of this past quarter was indeed a Samsung phone, but it was the very mid-range A51. So think about that for a second. That thing's using an Exynos processor. It's definitely not the fastest thing out there, but it's one of the cheapest. And this goes back to things I've been talking about for a very long time. People don't care about the processing power of their phone. We're at a point of low returns. These things are as powerful as certain desktops and laptops. You know your grandmother has an old laptop she has where your phone could destroy it. You know that's true. And diminishing returns, like sure, this will be better for gaming, but I'm trying to think of what games don't actually play on current Android phones. Like none of them. None of them are pushing the fact that you need like an 865 to play. It's just not the case. You look at something like Call of Duty, looks amazing on pretty much any phone you put it on. It's kind of overkill. So this isn't gonna be like some type of savior. Now, it could indeed be cheaper for Samsung, in which case they can make more profit per phone. So in that case, it'll make a difference. But as far as selling phones, it comes down to a very, very important thing. Actually, let's say two things. Price, and if you're Android or iOS. Pretty sure most people out there that buy Android phones or buy iOS phones from Apple aren't sitting there wondering which processor is the fastest. It's actually one of the last things that someone actually considers. They're considering the experience itself. Very few people are going to be hating on Apple and go, well, the processor's faster over there, so I'm just going to take all of my Android stuff and throw it in the trash and go onto an iPhone. Yeah, that's not something that happens. Same thing with iPhone fans. The ones that do happen to go over to Android has nothing to do with the processing power. It's all about experience of the software. Now, you should be able to do more with a more powerful processor and GPU, but tell me right now, like, what are you not able to do on your smartphone with the existing processor? The one thing that AMD will bring to the table is power management. They're really good at it, so maybe we'll get some extraordinary battery life out of these upcoming phones, and that's exciting. That part I would get excited about. And if the prices come back down, that I would get excited about. But this is largely nothing. It's really kind of just nothing. Now, at the end of the day, it could be that this relationship turns Samsung into a powerhouse, an unstoppable powerhouse. But I'm trying to think of when the last time is that I bought a phone for the very specific reason that it's the most powerful. I look for the most feature-rich, and I also try to take price into consideration. What about you? What is the #1 and #2 reason that you actually buy a phone? And really be honest about this. Tell me in the comments below. Why do you actually buy a smartphone? I'd love to hear exactly why you do. And by the way, some great videos right here. Make sure you check them out. I know you want to watch them. Just watch this video. What's wrong with you?